What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 players that you should be going to your waiver wire and picking up before week 2 of the fantasy football season. All of these players are going to be rostered under 50% ownership on Sleeper, so there is a good chance that they are all available in your leagues. If not, don't worry, there's a ton of players in today's episode, so there is going to be somebody for you to pick up in your fantasy football league. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these players. So first and foremost, I don't really want to waste your guys' time when it comes to listing a bunch of players, so I'm going to throw some names up on the screen. All of these players are close to or over 50% ownership, where if they are available on your waiver wire, you should be picking them up. But obviously, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about them because most of these guys should be rostered in your leagues. Those players are going to be Jameson Williams, Ezekiel Elliott, Tyler Lockett, Khalil Shakir, Matthew Stafford, J.K. Dobbins, Taysom Hill, Jaleel McLaughlin, Ty Chandler, Rashid Shaheed, Baker Mayfield, and Brandon Cooks. So if any of those guys are available on your waiver wires, make sure you go pick them up because they should not be on waiver wires in competitive leagues. Now, with that being said, the first player that I want to talk about today is going to be tight end Isaiah Likely for the Baltimore Ravens, and he is being rostered in about 31% of leagues right now, so there is a good chance he's on your waiver wire. And this week, 9 catches on 12 targets for 111 receiving yards and a touchdown. That was good for 26.1 fantasy points. That is the best tight end performance of the weekend. He is most likely going to be the highest targeted player on most people's waiver wires. He looks like he is going to have a larger role in this offense this year. Now, there is a lot of worry about Mark Andrews. I would not be worried about Mark Andrews if you do not have Isaiah Likely on your team. That being said, Isaiah Likely's role is not going anywhere. These guys should work as 1A, 1B in their offense, and I think that there is a large chance that both of these guys can finish as top 12 tight ends in fantasy football this year. So make sure you go prioritize a guy like Isaiah Likely. If you punted the tight end position, if you don't have a solid tight end, make sure you go get Isaiah Likely. He's a guy that I am definitely going to be targeting on my waiver wire, especially in leagues where I don't have a solidified tight end. I have a league where I have Pat Freiermuth. Likely is going to be a guy that I go after. Now, moving on to our second player, I'm going to stick in Baltimore. We'll look at the running back position. I want to talk about Justice Hill, who is being rostered in about 11% of leagues right now, and he spelled Derrick Henry a lot in this matchup. He kind of took him off of the field at times as well, especially when they were kind of trailing and they needed to go into a 2-minute offense and hurry up and things like that. They needed a pass catcher on the field, and that pass catcher was Justice Hill. Now, he got 6 catches on 8 targets for 52 receiving yards, and what that's going to do is in your PPR leagues, that's going to give you a lot of value in a PPR league. If anything ever happens to Derrick Henry, I'm not sure that Justice Hill would be the guy that just steps in and takes that role, but it looks like he has a role by himself already in standalone value with Derrick Henry on the field. And I think in the right matchups where we think that Baltimore is going to have to be competitive, they're going to have to throw the football, I think you can maybe flex a guy like Justice Hill, especially because of the PPR upside. Now let's look at one of these quarterbacks that I think you should be picking up. This is going to be contingent on if he is announced as the starter here on Tuesday, but it's going to be Justin Fields of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is currently rostered in about 23% of league, and this is a guy that we are picking up simply because of the rushing upside that he possesses. As you know, in a fantasy football league, the rushing is worth more than the passing, at least on the touchdown aspect in most leagues, unless you're playing in a 6-point passing touchdown league, but most people don't. So the rushing does get rewarded for those quarterbacks. Justin Fields, he gives you massive rushing upside in this offense, and he actually had 14 carries in a game where he didn't even throw a touchdown, didn't pass for a touchdown. This was all pretty much special teams and defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So like I said, he needs to be announced as the starter first. This matchup here this week is going to be Denver, so a much easier matchup for the most part, but the rushing upside alone, 14 carries for 57 yards, that's what I want to target. I think he's going to give you a high ceiling off the waiver wire, and if you're a team that maybe just lost Jordan Love for a week or two, Justin Fields could be a very good pick up and play type of option here in week 2. Now maybe Justin Fields is not available on your waiver wire and you want to look for another quarterback. I think Sam Darnold for the Minnesota Vikings is somebody you can pick up and play. He is being rostered in about 14% of leagues. Look, nobody expected Sam Darnold to look this good. I think we all knew that the New York Giants were not necessarily that good of a football team. The defense isn't bad. They have a decent defensive line, but Sam Darnold looked really good in this offense. He went 9 for 14, 208 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think that's enough that it should keep him on fantasy football team radars. He's probably going to finish as a high-end QB2 this week after the Monday night game because I am recording this before the Monday night game. Now, that being said, if you need a guy that you can pick up and play, you can probably play him. They do have to play San Francisco in week 2, but maybe even better, that is a competitive game, so Sam Darnold is going to have to throw the football a little bit more, maybe going to be without Jordan Addison, maybe we ding him for that as well, but I think Sam Darnold showed us enough in that week 1 matchup that we should at least pick him up and see what he can do, because Kevin O'Connell has had a history of making some of these quarterbacks look really good in this offense. Sam Darnold just might be the next guy. Now, moving on to another running back, I want to talk about Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is rostered currently in about 11% of leagues, and he had a much larger role than I think we expected. The chatter this offseason was that Tank Bigsby was probably going to spell Travis Etienne. There was going to be a little bit more of a committee approach here this year than there had been in years past, but I don't think any of us expected it to be this much of a committee. He averaged 6.1 yards per attempt this last weekend against the Miami Dolphins, going 12 for 73 yards in this game. I think he is going to be a true complementary piece in this offense, and it looks like he has a larger role than expected. That said, is it going to look like this every single week? Probably not. You want to have your best players have the football in their hands, and that is Travis Etienne, but this does have true handcuff potential, and if anything were to ever happen to Travis Etienne, I think Tank Bigsby could fill in as the full-time starter in this offense. So definitely somebody that I'm picking up and stashing. Even if the role doesn't look like it's going to be consistent for the next couple of weeks, he does have a lot of upside if something were to happen to ETN. Now, moving on to my next player, I want to talk about Alexander Mattison of the Las Vegas Raiders. He is currently being rostered in about 10% of leagues. And when I talked about Justice Hill removing Derrick Henry from the football field, Alexander Mattison removed Zamir White from the football field as well. It looks like he is going to be the third down back, the guy that is going to come out in these pass catching situations when they are trailing, because when they were trailing here against the Los Angeles Chargers, it was all Alexander Mattison, no Zamir White. Now, that being said, this isn't a team that we expect to be very good. We don't expect them to be in a lot of games where they are going to be up and they're going to be grinding out the clock, which means that we might see a lot more Alexander Mattison than I think we want to. Might even mean we see a lot more than we think we're going to see. That being said, I think this is a guy that we need to pick up if there is a role for him in these pass catching situations where Gardner Minshew is playing keep up or trying to catch back up in games. I think Alexander Mattison has some PPR upside, and if Zamir White goes down to an injury, Alexander Mattison could have both the early down work and the pass catching work. So that is somebody that I think is very valuable and definitely worth an add here in week 2. Now, I want to go on to another running back. We're going to talk about Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is being rostered in about 25% of leagues, and I will say he had 9 carries for 62 yards. A lot of that production came when they were up in this matchup and when that game was out of reach, so he does still very much feel like a handcuff to Rachaad White, but I do think that Rachaad White, the inefficiency has kind of been an issue with him over the last couple of years. I think Bucky Irving, like I said, a handcuff, a high-end handcuff, however you want to view him, he's shown enough that we should pick him up and we should put him on the back end of our rosters. He's not necessarily somebody that I'm prioritizing. I'm not going to spend a lot of my fab on him. I'm not going to burn a waiver priority on him. But if I can get him on the back end of my roster and hold him for a couple more weeks just to see how this Tampa Bay Buccaneers backfield shakes out, that's definitely something I'm considering doing. Now, moving on to the wide receiver position, I want to talk about Demarcus Robinson of the Los Angeles Rams. He is currently rostered in about 12% of leagues. And in the same breath, I actually kind of want to mention Colby Parkinson, tight end for the Rams as well. Mainly, we are adding these guys because there was a re-aggravation of the knee injury to Puka Nacua. It is uncertain if Puka Nacua is going to play in week 2. That's something we're going to have to monitor throughout the week. But Demarcus Robinson, he had 7 targets in this game versus the Lions. If Puka misses time, they're going to have to lean on Parkinson. They're going to have to lean on Robinson. And I think both of those guys can be picked up and streamed, especially if you have, let's say, Puka Nacua on your roster, or you just need another guy that you can plug into your flex at the wide receiver position. Or if maybe you're a team that has Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, you suffered a tight end injury this week and you need a streaming position, maybe it's Colby Parkinson. So like I said, Puka, he left this game. These guys are next up. If he misses time, they're streaming options. If not, we probably don't want them on our rosters. Now, the next player we'll talk about is going to be wide receiver Greg Dortch for the Arizona Cardinals, and he is currently being rostered in about 12% of leagues as well. Now, in last week's stash video, I did tell you guys about Greg Dortch. I did say that he was worth picking up because I felt like he was going to have a larger role than people expected. And in week 1, he had 8 targets. He was second in the team in targets, only behind Trey McBride. So I'm not going to say, that you should have picked up Greg Dortch last week. I don't think people are going to be running to the waiver wire to burn a bunch of fab on Greg Dortch, but he's definitely more prioritized this week than he was last week. You probably could have got him for $0 fab last week. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that this week. That being said, looking at the upcoming schedule, the schedule is very nice for the Arizona Cardinals. There's not a lot of tough matchups for the wide receiver position as a whole, at least based off of last year's statistics. statistics, which is really all we can go off of at this time. So I think Greg Dortch, he's somebody that I would pick up, and I think you can put him on the back end of your roster and just see how this role progresses over the next couple of weeks. And last but not least, I do want to mention Andrei Iosivas of the Cincinnati Bengals. He is rostered in about 22% of leagues. Now, the reason why that number is up a little bit is because T. Higgins missed this last week against the New England Patriots. There are already rumors floating around. I'm hearing some of it already that T. Higgins may not be playing in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if that is the case, obviously we have to have Iosivas on the back end of our rosters because that role there in Cincinnati should be a decent role. Now, I know they're coming off of a very ugly game here in week 1. Iosivas himself in that game went 3 for 6 on 6 targets there for 26 yards. Not the best game from the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if that is necessarily going to be expected to be the norm. We hope that it's not if we've invested in anybody from Cincinnati. So Iosivas, we should pick him up this week, have him on the rosters if he's not already rostered in your leagues, because like I said, a lot of people went out and grabbed him last week when we had the T. Higgins news, but he should be added because this week's matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs should be high scoring. Again, I'm saying should be high scoring, and Iosivas should be a part of that. So make sure he's on your rosters here this week as well. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video, I am recording this before the Monday Night Football game. I know that there's a couple players in that game that could end up turning into waiver wire ads. Maybe a guy like Tyler Conklin, Malachi Corley, Jordan Mason. These are some of the names that I think just pop off the top of my head. A Braylon Allen even. If any of these guys end up being waiver wire options, I will put a note in the comment section. So just make sure you go down to the comment section right now and check and make sure that there's not a note. But like I said, I am recording this before the game. Just timing wise, it makes the most sense. So make sure you go check that comment section for me. While you're down there, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you also hit that subscribe button, and make sure you go join our Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, and that is where you get the most news from me. So anytime there's updates to my rankings every week, week by week, we do the wide receivers, the running backs, all of that stuff. All of that stuff gets put into the Discord, so make sure you go join that Discord. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.